The World Wide Web, a digital tool that connects the globe through websites and electronic documents. But what is the web? Where did it come from? And how has it affected global access to information? It is the 1960s, and the concept of computing is starting to bloom. A young Tim Berners-Lee is coming home from high school to find his father, a mathematician by the name of Conway Berners-Lee, doing research for a speech. Conway had helped program one of the first commercial computers at Manchester University, and both of Tim's parents were, quote, full of excitement over the idea that, in principle, a person could program a computer to do most anything. Conway was researching the human brain. He felt that, if computers were not organized in a hierarchical manner, they could make seemingly random connections such as a human does. This idea stuck with Tim throughout his life. In the following years, a man named Ted Nelson would create Hypertext, a digital tool that allowed electronic documents to be connected via links. Tim graduated from Oxford University in 1976 with a degree in physics and went on to work as an independent IT professional at the CERN research facility in Geneva. Tim noticed that throughout CERN there was disorganization. He saw that all of the other researchers had all different types of computers. While there, Tim used his free time and the ideas that his parents' speech had given him during his first program titled Enquire in 1980, based on the old Victorian almanac named Inquire Within Upon Everything. He used this program to remember who was doing what at the research facility. Enquire used a web-like organization structure as opposed to a hierarchical structure like that of which was traditionally used, because Tim believed that this would greatly benefit the way people accessed information. Tim shared Enquire with only a few people at CERN. Later, Tim left CERN, leaving Enquire behind, and the original copy was eventually lost. But the idea never left Tim. A few years later, Tim returned to CERN, who hired him as part of a group responsible for capturing and processing data as a result of the experiments performed there. By this time, CERN had set up a bare internal network, though it was still only among the servers and not the computers the scientists brought in. According to Brian Carpenter, the head of networking at CERN at the time, Tim, quote, could do his assigned work in about half an hour in the morning so that he had the rest of the day to think. During this time, Tim purchased a Next brand computer to continue his work. It was on this computer that he programmed the first version of the web, as well as set up the first web server. However, the creation of the web was not spontaneous. It all began when Tim wrote two formal proposals, both with the idea of Enquire embedded, each titled Information Management, a proposal, one in 1989 and one in 1990. These proposals were finalized by a co-worker and one of Tim's best friends, Robert Caillou. The first one was rejected, but the second one was not. With his new permission, Tim created numerous tools to aid him in inventing the web, things like Hypertext Transfer Protocol, known as HTTP, Hypertext Markup Language, abbreviated as HTML, and even asking some associates, namely Nicola Pello and Robert Caillou, to write the first web browser called the Line Mode browser. The first web server after Tim's at CERN went up in 1991 at the Stanford Linear Accelerator Center in California, and in the following years server after server began to pop up all around the world, particularly in the US, along with new browsers. However, something changed in 1994. Not only did CERN and the web team decide to release the web to the world royalty-free, CERN got permission to build the Large Hadron Collider, which was their next experiment. The issue laid in the fact that CERN could no longer support the web or its team. Tim decided to relocate to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in the United States. Here, he founded the World Wide Web Consortium, or W3C, which was, quote, an international community devoted to developing open web standards. Though the intent of the World Wide Web Consortium is good, the fact that it had to be created implies that there is inequality on the web. The goal of the W3C was to set up standards to make the web accessible and safe for everybody. To do this, it began with the Web Accessibility Initiative, the goal of which was to translate websites to the user's language, aid in the creation of new websites, and help in making as many accessible sites as possible. All of these things enhance the web and allow the world to use it to its fullest potential. However, there are still issues. Not everybody in the world has access to things such as internet providers, and many people live in countries where the web is censored by governments. Information inequality is an issue on the web in different areas as well. For instance, in one of his TED Talks, Tim Berners-Lee discusses how some of the data on the web is bad data, and how raw data should be presented. More specifically, he states that, quote, people want unaltered data. What he means by this is that the general public wants the truth, the uncensored information that is provided to them, and he also believes that if all of the data was presented raw, as he states, the world could advance much faster technologically. But when he made this speech in 2009, and even today, some of the data on the web is not presented raw, and it is altered. And if there is incorrect or fictitious data, there is information inequality. But it's more than just bad data. There are also issues in accessing that data in the first place. Prior to the invention of the web, when computers wanted to connect to each other, they would have to specify which computer they wanted to connect to and send everything they wanted to send to just that one computer. However, with the invention of the web, the need to specify destinations was destroyed, and everybody could access all kinds of information. Eventually, software was developed so that information that was not wanted by everybody could be blocked. For example, if there was a parent who did not want their child to visit a certain website, they could use their software to make sure their child did not visit that site. However, this kind of software could end up in the wrong hands. In 1999, the W3C described the standards used to regulate this software and what it could do, called PICS, or Platform for Internet Content Selection. Although old, the article notes that governments could assume some rules of censorship even without PICS, while other rules would be harder to assume if PICS had not been introduced. If a government had the ability to censor things on the World Wide Web, then people would not have access to the same data as those in other countries or under other governments, and thus would suffer from information inequality. However, there have been and still are other examples of information inequality, some of which have been solved. For instance, there once was the issue of all of the web pages being only text. This may not appear to be an issue, but there is a reason that the Mosaic browser was so popular for being able to use images. For instance, if a child is trying to browse the web with a parent, but they cannot read, an image can help them grasp the information they are accessing. Another example is how, at first, many web browsers did not connect to different types of computers, but have since adapted to fit different devices. Another early issue in accessibility has to do with URLs, or Uniform Resource Locators. They are the lines of text at the top of a browser that lets the user know where they are. A familiar example might be something such as Google.com, but these URLs were not always meant to be visible or even used at all. Originally, Tim's idea was that all of these documents on the web were connected mainly by links using hypertext. If you wanted to get to another document, you could search for it, or you could use a link to access it from a different document. He realized, though, that this would impede the ability to access the information on the web to its full potential, so he began by making the viewing of the URL optional, and it evolved into modern day, where it is at the top of all web pages displayed in the browser. The thing is, none of these problems would have existed now or previously had the web not been invented. The creation of the World Wide Web was a turning point in history that caused inequality in access to information. There are some impacts of the creation of these issues on the web. A few have been resolved, and many have a solution that's being worked on. For example, the Mosaic browser from 1993, as previously mentioned, solved the issue of the lack of images. As browsers evolved, they began to show their URL bars. By the first Mosaic browser, the URL was being shown, and although censorship is a possibility and is generally negatively viewed when used poorly by, say, a government, an impact that's being worked on is the ability for anyone who speaks any language to visit any site thanks to translation. But what other impacts did the web have? The web was created as a tool for the scientists at CERN to share information easier, thus expediting the research process. The web fulfilled this goal and began to spread. Eventually, it came to be used in households using new web browsers such as Mosaic and eventually Netscape Navigator and Internet Explorer. The use of the web eventually led to the creation of search engines such as Google or Yahoo, as well as social media, as well as other methods of web communication. The web is still used today to do things like order goods off of a website such as Amazon, visit social media like YouTube.com, or do research online using tools such as Oxford's Online Dictionary. To this day, the web remains an important tool for getting information as well as communicating with others. If we did not have the web, it is likely that we would not be where we are today.